Okay, let's see here. This is my second try because it looked like the chat got stuck. And when I was trying to see what you guys were saying, it disconnected somehow. This is what I was worried about, that I wouldn't know how to work this kind of things. Oh, hi, Kayla, Ella. Now I'm seeing people's chats. Okay, great. I didn't know when I messed that up if it would mean that nobody could find it again. Okay, I don't know how this works. This is neat. I've never had a strong enough internet connection to even try this. I know for a lot of people who live in places where there is just great internet all the time, that may be hard to believe, but the first 300 something videos on this channel were all uploaded over a 3G, 1 bar of 3G cell phone connection. And then it got a little stronger service in the area where I was, and it was then like 1 bar of 4, which was still pretty slow. Most videos took 12 to 24 hours to upload. But where we're out a little more in the open here, I can actually uh, get a little better service. So we're going to try this and hopefully it doesn't drop out again. And anyway, hello, hello. It is nice to see so many people here. That is exciting. I had no idea how this would actually work out. Okay, so I'm going to try to be a little organized here. I have a list of questions that a bunch of people had asked me through the past several videos. I meant to get this done a couple weeks ago before we all got sick and got nothing done. So anyway, some of these questions were asked almost a month ago at this point, and I wasn't planning on having the wait be quite that long, but here we are now. So I'm going to go through those questions and then try to come back and answer any you guys are asking now. What I've seen other people do, which I could see is helpful as fast as this chat is going, is if you have an actual question for me, could you put at least the start of it in all caps so when I scroll back through, I can find it. And I believe the way this works is that once we're done here, the sometime after it finishes, the video becomes just like a regular video that you can watch, not live. So hopefully anybody who asked a question and didn't make it here in person can watch that later. Wasn't able to, I'm sure, fit in every single question, but some of them kind of were duplicates or were very related. So I tried to pick out anybody that any that kind of covered something a bunch of people ask at least. Anyway, so here we go. On the bees recently, somebody just asked, Maureen asked me, are wasps a threat in my area? Her mom is a beekeeper and she remembers her battling with wasps. My bees do not seem to have had a problem with wasps so far. We do have wasps in the area, but either the guard bees sufficiently guard the entrance to the hive, or the wasps haven't tried to bother the honeybees. I'm not sure. I've not seen any issues with that. Somebody else asked, do I make my own hummingbird mix or buy a mixture? I make my own. If you go to the channel on Odyssey or YouTube or wherever and just search for hummingbirds, it should come up. But real quick, I just take a quart jar, put 1 cup of organic unrefined sugar in there, and then fill it to the top with hot water. So that's like half gonna actually, because of the way the space works out, be about halfway between a 3-to-1 and a 4-to-1 proportion. That seems to work really well. Hummingbirds do not need red dye or any of that nonsense in there. They do come check out the color red, but the feeder bottle itself that I use is on all the feeders we have, which you can also find linked in that video, I'm pretty sure. Is red, and we get quite a few hummingbirds and they seem to like it, and it's really easy to just mix up a new quart anytime I need. Denise Tanner, sorry if I butcher the pronunciation of anybody's names here, asks, do you eat or use a duck egg just like a chicken egg? Do they taste different? Yes, we eat and use them just like chicken eggs, except sometimes you need less because they are a much bigger egg. And even inside the egg shell itself, there is a higher proportion of yolk, and there's still more white than a chicken egg, but in proportion to itself, there's more yolk and less white. I use them interchangeably. I don't really notice much of a taste difference with our own. Now, of course, our chickens and ducks hang out together-ish all day. They free range the property and have access to basically the same feed. The ducks spend more time in the water eating whatever aquatic life they find. The chickens don't prefer to swim, and so they eat grasshoppers and stuff they find on the land, but they have similar diets, which might have a lot to do with why the eggs taste very similar. But I have heard, I don't do a lot of fine baking, but that if you're baking, I think especially the more touchy things with meringues or like angel food cakes, stuff like that, that duck eggs are actually better for baking, things like that. Something about the texture is just a little better. I don't do enough fancy baking to have noticed that difference. But yeah, we do a lot of just frying duck eggs up and having them for breakfast, or you could make egg salad or any of the other things we do with eggs. Some people say they have a slightly richer taste. With ours, I just haven't really been able to taste a whole lot of a difference. Robert, I'm going to butcher his last name, so I'm not going to try. Ask me, this is a very thoughtful question. Do I know if I get more YouTube credit if he watches the commercials or skips ads? It seems to me that watching commercials would be beneficial for YouTube. Yes, I think a lot of that stuff is algorithm controlled, but yes, I believe if you actually watch ads, they credit the channel for that rather than skipping them. And I don't really know all the math on how it works. I know a whole lot of it is based on what Google knows about you and not about the channel or the particular video. But that's a very thoughtful question. And yes, I think if you let ads play, the channel does get some credit for that. So that's very sweet of you to ask. I got several similar comments on the last video I had done, whatever that was, a couple weeks ago, about feeding eggshells back to the chickens or putting them in your compost or using it as a supplement or whatever else you may want to do. About that, people were concerned that feeding eggshells back to the chickens for their calcium needs would end up with having chickens eating eggs. I have read some people say that. I've also read more people say what has been my personal experience. If you have well-fed, well-nourished chickens that have all the minerals they need, they're not likely to want to break their own eggs. We have never yet had a chicken eat their own eggs, except we have one hen who likes to poop her eggs from the very top of their perch, which is like 13 feet in the air, in the middle of the night. She's probably going to end up going away here because that's a fairly useless trait. So anyway, all of her eggs hit the floor and go splat, and I often don't see them till sometime the next morning, and the chickens have eaten the entire thing. But they're splatting because they're falling that many feet through the air and hitting the barn floor, not because the chickens are pecking into them and breaking them. So my guess is, and my experience has been, that that's not an issue if you have well-nourished chickens that have all the minerals they need. They've got no desire and are probably that much less likely actually to go breaking eggs open to eat. But that is a concern several people expressed. That's been our experience. Patricia Desharud ask, is the alpha rooster's foot healed now? Yes, Golden Boy had the broken toe on one of his toes and it's healed up. It's a little cockeyed now, like a prize fighter's nose, but it's all healed up and he's running around fine. I don't know how he broke it. Somebody suggested our perches were too high. It did it in the middle of the day. They definitely weren't on the perch. So that I don't believe was the cause. We've had a few hens break toes. Willie, our other rooster, had broken a toe at one point. So I guess that's one of the side effects of letting them free range. But yeah, Golden Boy was limping around there for a while and he is fine now. Linda Leal asks, are we planning on using duck feathers to fill pillows? It's occurred to me right now, a lot of our birds are molting. Well, the baby ducklings that don't look like babies anymore are just getting their first set of feathers in. So it's not mostly the ducks, but our adult chickens are molting and there are feathers all over the place. And at the moment, I'm just letting them decompose back into the ground. Feather meal, which is a garden supplement you can buy, is a highly nutritious fertilizer. But it has crossed my mind that sometime when I'm not quite so busy, it would be fun to collect all the little downy ones and see if we could do that. So maybe someday. Ellen Murphy asked another very thoughtful question. Do we get credit if she orders on Amazon because she orders off there all the time? Yes, if you use the affiliate link or go to amazon.com/shop Nyth. I think it's linked under all the videos. Anyway, yes, then they give us a little credit. Doesn't cost you anything. I mostly use it because I had so many people ask me, where do you get this? Where do you get your hummingbird feeder or whatever? And I was having to repeatedly look up links to things. And so it mostly was helpful to me because it let me organize all that in a nice, tidy form where I could quickly find that and reference it when people were asking me questions. But yes, if you order something after clicking on one of those links, then Amazon does give us a little credit. And that's lovely and helpful with bills around here. Helen Cumber asks that she's never seen me swatting a mosquito. What biting insects are at 6,300 feet? There are mosquitoes in the general area. At times, there are very thick clouds of mosquitoes. Some of that depends on the year. And in particular, here where we live right now, I have only seen 2 mosquitoes all year, and I spend most of the time outside. I saw a few more in my old clearing, but even there, they weren't too bad. I think it was partially because I had so many hummingbirds and other birds around. They really did a number, and bats at night. They really did a number on the insect population, which kept them fairly under control. I also, I guess, am lucky to be one of those people that I'm not mosquito's favorite person. Clay is one of mosquito's favorite people. And like my good friend Beth, we can be sitting beside each other. If I would get 2 mosquito bites, she would get 20 at least. So that may be part of the reason you see me swatting them less. But around here, we're a little more in the wide open. Even with the creek flowing through, there's not really any stagnant water. And I just have not seen many mosquitoes. Plus, of course, we got a pretty good chicken patrol and duck patrol and lots of swallows and sparrows and finches and, robins and meadowlarks and all kinds of other wild birds around here that also eat a lot of bugs. So that may be helping as well. But there are mosquitoes up here in the Wyoming mountains. In places I have hiked through thick clouds that made you want to just run for miles to get away from them. So it's certainly not true that there's no mosquitoes. And as far as other biting insects, I mean, there's several kinds of bees that could sting you. There are a few ticks, not many. We get a lot of ticks on moose around the area, but the kind of ticks that bite people or dogs, I've very rarely seen. Like 15 years in Wyoming, I've seen 2 maybe in all those years, and I've spent a lot of time walking around the mountains. So fortunately, we don't have too many biting things. I guess there's hobo spiders. Never been bitten by one. Fortunately, they like to hide in little dark corners. So it's a good idea to use gloves if you're going to unstack a wood pile. They don't want to chase humans down, but they are poisonous and they could bite you. So that's biting. Spiders are not an insect. I do know that. That's biting bugs in our area. Bill Kavinsky asks if I plan to plant a few hundred more trees and shrubs this fall and every fall thereafter to establish my future orchard and forest. Yes, I hope to. As behind as we are right now, I'm not sure how many will get planted this fall, but that was certainly the hope. We planted some more this spring, still working to keep the grass from choking out everything that we've got growing right now. But so I don't know how many hundreds it will be this fall, but I certainly hope to continue planting stuff around here at a fairly substantial scale for the next few years, and then probably at least some amount every year for the rest of my life. Alice Kane asked, could I put clover everywhere to help get the quackgrass under control? Now the clover has started out competing it around the tiny house. Could I put some wildflowers again? Yes, that's still an ongoing battle we're trying to figure out. Clover does seem to be the one thing that is making space for itself in the quackgrass. I've got a good bit of tall clover. I'll have to get a good picture or video of that growing in the orchard where I had 2 years ago seeded yellow clover, crimson clover, which did bloom a little bit, but seems to have died out. The crimson was the least hardy, white clovers and purple clovers. And several of them are successfully currently competing with the quackgrass, and the bees love it. There's wild bumblebees, there's leaf cutter bees, there's little teeny weeny bees whose names I don't know, and there's, our honeybees all over that stuff. It's beautiful. I hope to keep planting more of that. As far as being able to seed wildflowers, I still think the grass / now clover mixture is probably thick enough it would choke them out. I have worked to tarp several more areas around the property with cardboard and or tarps with old fence posts on them to hold them down because we can get some gusty wind here. that hopefully those areas will all be dead by spring. The grass will be dead underneath there, and I will be able to plant sunflowers and wildflowers and a whole lot of other things I want to be planting. That's going to be an ongoing project. We may also experiment with using something like the skid steer, the backhoe, to rip up a bigger area of sod and like pile the sod where it can break down in a pile, and seeding more stuff into there. So that's an ongoing battle. Mom Stetson asked, I'm sure this was in relation to the ducks, when will the male's tails start to curl? So with Swedish ducks, that's basically the way you can tell who's a male and a female. They Some breeds of ducks have very distinctively different coloring for the males and females. Swedish ducks do not. So the males get this little teeny 2 or 3 curly feathers right at the bottom of their tail. Supposedly, what I read is that those curled feathers are supposed to show up between 8 to 12 weeks old. We had one male that at 6 weeks old got a very distinctive curl. I guess he's the most manly boy in the bunch. So for now, we're sure we have one male, but I'd be rather shocked if we have 14 girls. The oldest of the 2 batches of ducklings is just almost 8 weeks old now. So I'm assuming over the next month, we'll probably see some more boys' tails curled. But right now we know we've got one boy, but I'd be shocked if we got one boy and 14 girls out of that hatch. Cindy Huckaluck, she's hoping the new hives have enough time to get established before the cold weather comes. Is there a reason we did 3 hives instead of 2 strong hives going into winter? Yes, I'm hoping they have time to get established too. It's been cool overnight. Finally, more of a seasonal temperature. But looking at the forecast, we're supposed to go back into the 80s and nearly 90s this week, which is absolutely crazy at this time of year, when it often is more snow flurries than not. So, yes, I'm hoping they have time. Right now, they are, both those new split hives are fairly full with honey. I gave them a good bit from the original hive when I first moved them because that hive had so much stores. I have not harvested any honey yet. I may do so later in the fall in a few weeks, or I may just let them keep it all till spring and then see what they have that's extra that they for sure don't need at that point. But right now we've still got, I can hear bees buzzing outside the open window right now from the flowers in the planters. A lot of the hyssops and mint family stuff is blooming right now. The clovers are still blooming. Goldenrod's kind of just finishing up. We've got a neighboring field that's just probably likely to be cut again soon, but it's starting to bloom with alfalfa. So the bees are still hauling in a ton of food. And last time I looked in the hives, they have substantial honey stores. So I'm not worried about that. And why did I do 2 splits off the main hive instead of just 1 to have 2 stronger hives? I was actually being encouraged by several people that my hive was strong enough that I should have done 3 splits for 4 hives total. And that seemed too little for me. That would be making the colonies too small. So I went with 2. I don't know what's the right call. I'm learning. Jamie Whitehorn said a live Q&A would be great. So it looks like this is working. One question would be, how do I keep the chickens from raiding the vegetable patch? So far it's worked that they simply haven't found it because the tiny house is down kind of at this end of the property, as you've probably seen in various photos and videos. And the chicken barn is clear at the other end by the shop. There's a pretty big open area right now in between. At some point, that area is going to be mostly full of orchard. It's starting to fill with orchard, but at the moment it's pretty exposed. So it's worked out very nicely that the chickens pretty much go from their pen to like the wood pile to under a trailer that's parked there to the woods edge along the creek where it's shady and there's probably more bugs to eat anyway, and so on. And so they simply haven't discovered the garden, which is on the other side of the tiny house from them. If they do, I'll probably have to put a fence around it because even if they weren't into like eating the vegetables, they would, I'm sure, dig everything out by the roots. So far they simply haven't found it because there's too big of an open space in the middle that they don't like crossing because they keep a pretty good eye out for hawks, and they prefer going the other way. But if they ever figure out that there's yummy things over there to dig up, I'll probably have to put a fence around it. Oh man, you guys, this comment thread is going crazy. Okay, I'm sticking with the comments I have right now so I can get through this. Can I do a video on the various fertilizers I use? Yes, that should probably be its own video, and I guess I've done several. You can look on the channel, look up composting. I've done multiple ones about how I do the lazy man's version of slow composting. I add compost to the garden every year. I have also used horse manure before from a neighboring farm. If you are sure this is worth checking. Horse manure, rotted hay, straw. If you are positive that nothing in either of the hay products or straw products or that was fed to the horses had any of the amylopride family of stuff, Grazon is one of the brand names, that stuff persists through compost and will kill your entire garden. I dealt with this quite a few years ago, probably when most of you guys were not following life here yet, and quite a few other people have had around the world have had experiences recently. It will kill everything in your garden for years. That is not a joke, and it's no fun. But if you can get stuff that you're sure is clean, and it will pass right through the digestive tract of a horse or a cow and through a compost pile without breaking down, and will still kill things for years. So check on that. But I have used old hay, I have used horse manure, I have used sawdust, I have used wood chips from fully ground trees. And then you can also look up videos I've done on running some mineral analysis tests. When we moved in here, the soil in this spot was fairly out of balance on some of that. So I've added some specific minerals that to help balance that mix out for our area. That would not necessarily translate to your area. Our soil's super high in calcium. Yours might be super low. So you might need to do something totally different than me. But I've got videos on doing soil mineral analysis. And then this year, kind of for the first, I've been working on doing what you saw in one of the videos this spring with doing like a fermented dandelion fertilizer. I've used that several times. And I actually just the other day started a couple new batches of fermented plant matter fertilizers to be able to spray on in a liquid form. So anyway, maybe I'll do a video on all that topic because that could be a very big topic. Somebody pointed out, I think this was on the video about the problems with the flea beetles, that they tell people gardening is a 75% proposition. Every year a different 25% fails. There's a whole lot of truth to that. I have been gardening since helping my parents when I was a few years old. So for quite a few decades now. And yeah, I would say regardless of how long you've been doing it, something's going to fail every year. There's a lot of truth to that. And then I got a lot of questions and comments about those beetles. What is their life cycle? What can I use to kill them? And so on. Are they going to come back next year? And just real briefly, yes, they could come back next year. They lay eggs in the soil. I have considered getting some beneficial nematodes that are supposed to be a little creepy crawly thing that goes under the soil and likes to eat flea beetle larvae. I may do that. They did not just decimate all the brassica stuff. And then several people asked, why did they eat only those things and not go on to eat the carrots and the potatoes and such? Apparently flea beetles have fairly specific tastes and they can kind of only eat one family of plants. There's several kinds of flea beetles, but the ones I had were definitely ones that liked brassicas. So they ate all the cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, radishes, and they did not just find my garden. Off behind the garden a little ways, a neighbor had a field that had probably like 30 acres of wild mustard growing. They had seeded a new alfalfa crop in it, but a lot of wild mustard came up. It was beautiful. I think our honeybees harvested gobs and gobs of honey off of that. Bright yellow blooming away. And the flea beetles killed every single plant on those 30 acres. They also found every individual plant of mustard or radish or anything that was growing anywhere around our property or any of our neighbors. So it's definitely not confined to just my garden. And yes, I did try diatomaceous earth, did a few rounds of that. I think it killed a bunch. I tried the alcohol and a little dish soap and water spray. And yes, that killed a bunch. Some of the big cabbage leaves that make like a cup like this had thousands of dead beetles floating in that little cup. And I tried neem oil and I tried coffee grounds. I think each one of those maybe deterred a couple and maybe killed millions. I think there was just a flea beetle plague year. There was billions of bugs. That's no exaggeration. So the fact that I maybe killed a few millions in the garden didn't really affect it. They still ate all those things. So anyway, I'm hoping next year will be more normally cool. And I might try getting some of those beneficial nematodes in the soil this fall. A couple of people said I had too much of a monoculture with several cabbage plants beside each other in a single bed. Maybe, but I had like in a 30-foot radius around the cabbages. I think I counted at least 73 different species of plants, including mint, which they're not supposed to like, sweet alyssum, which is supposed to distract them, and they totally ate and killed. basil, which they're not supposed to like, and they ate some holes in, though they didn't totally kill it. Marigolds, which are supposed to deter them, which they stripped the leaves right down to the skeletons. So I think we just had a really bad flea beetle year, and it sounded like several other people around the country did as well, and that sucks. We're just going to hope that's better next year. Oh, and then in general, my general strategy is to have healthy enough soil with fairly appropriately balanced minerals and lots of active microbial and fungal life, so that I can grow healthy enough plants so that bugs don't eat them. But the garden is significantly better than it was last year. It's not the whole way there. The soil was fairly poor and out of balance and such when we started here, so that's just going to take some more years to keep getting it better. But hopefully we'll get there at one point. So there's a bunch of beetle questions from a ton of people. Some Jesper Anderson asked me about what have we done to protect solar panels from blowing off and landing over at the neighbors. This open area must get a bit of wind. You can look back at videos and blog posts about how those solar panel frames are built. They have a very, very wide triangular base that is fairly heavy. And then here in this spot, we actually, there's two separate bases that can be taken apart so the panels can rotate with the changing sun in the course of the year. We actually, once we set them where you saw us move them and to a permanently sunny spot over there the other day, we actually screwed the two frames together so the wind would have to pick up the entire thing at once. And yes, we do get some big wind gusts, but so far in whatever a year and a half of having them around here, it has yet to budge the solar panels. So that seems to be working. Mary Jackson asks a whole bunch of things. What are the tiny house tires sitting on? She was wondering if it's okay for her tiny house to be on the tires or if she needs to raise it a bit. So you could see in that same video where we moved the solar panels when I crawled under the house and showed you what the underside of the house trailer looks like. The tires that the tiny house is on are resting on actually just a slab of wood, so they're not directly in contact with the soil. Clay had put down a slab of wood on each side, so the tires are parked on that, but the main house weight is resting on the jacks that are on all four corners, which are also on solid pressure treated chunks of wood. And it's taking the tires are still in contact with the ground, or with that chunk of wood on the ground, but the full weight of the house is not resting on them. Eventually tires would decompose. They'll decompose a lot faster if they're in the sunlight. These have been covered almost their entire life by either snow or the planters. They're now completely covered by the really cool custom planters Clay made us that fit exactly around them. And now I just lost my train of thought. Oh, and heat is the hardest thing on tires as well. And we do not generally have a hot climate. It's cool here for most of the year. Most insurance companies' tire blowout claims apparently are in the very southernmost hot states. So yes, I'm sure the tires will decompose eventually. Hopefully, Nyth is never moving again. We'll see. But anyway, that's the tire setup we've got. And best wishes with your tiny house, Mary. Coffee Fetcher asks, said my lovely husband is a nice sturdy chap and the stairs to the bedroom look a bit narrow. Do we have plans to perhaps add a little extension to the house and turn that into a bedroom and keep the existing upstairs for storage maybe? So yes, these little loft stairs are a bit small. That's not really so much the issue. It's more that they're steep. And yes, Clay is a sturdy fellow, and he doesn't love crawling in and out of that loft bed. And yes, our plans are probably not to add an extension to this home, but I've talked about this a little bit before. Our plans are to definitely build a small home, probably 500 or 600 square feet, attached to the ground here. I don't know when that's going to happen. It's going to be dependent on our time to do it and finances to do it. But I don't have this question here, but several other people had asked, why is the tiny house down here in the garden and stuff so far down here, and the chicken barn and the shop and such are way down there? That is because way down there is where we are planning to build a little house where it would be very close to those things. And then the orchard is growing up in between. So eventually the tiny house and the small house would hopefully have an entire orchard between them, kind of making each one have its own little clearing. Now that's requires some vision right now because a lot of our trees are still very, very tiny. Most of the orchard trees are taller than me now, so that's exciting. But anyway, that would allow us to use this as a guest house or whatever, or have friends stay here, or even rent it or something like that, and have each house have some space and privacy from each other. So that is in the works. At the very earliest, it would be getting started on building a house next spring at this point. So I don't know when that's going to happen. Charvo asked if I'm still using the Wonder Washer for laundry with two of us now. They're thinking of it for their apartment to save on laundry costs, or are there plans for something larger since you have space in the shop? Didn't notice a clothesline in the wide shots. Yes, I've continued using that part of the time for doing clothing laundry. Some of the time, the caretaker cabin that Clay stays in through the week at his job does have a standard, electric washer and dryer. So sometimes we do a larger load of stuff there. My long-term dream is to get a manual washing machine through Layman's. I think they're made specifically for them. Laymans.com. They sell all kinds of cool things. Probably distant cousins of the owners, at least started, because I'm related to most of the plane or X-plane community. Anyway, they've been sold out for a long time, but they have a fairly big manual washer. It's basically a big tub. You can put about the same amount in as a standard big, like, top-loading washing machine. It's got a hand crank. You would be able to do much larger loads, and I like the idea of being able to do my laundry, whether there's ever, power accessible or not, as long as I can boil water to have some hot water. So long-term, I plan to get one of those. They're a little bit pricey, and they've been sold out for a really long time, but long-term, that is my plan. And yes, there'll be a clothesline up at some point. Right now, I still have that little, like, folding accordion rack we can put clothes on to dry. And at the moment, we haven't got any other clothesline put up. Might not happen until after some other construction stuff gets done, so it's not in the way in the meantime, but it'll be there one day. Rocket Scientist 66 asks, do we have a good supply of mice for the kitties? I mean, that would be good, right, for their carnivore lifestyle. Their cats bring home mice for them. Anyway, yes, we have yet to get them. I've never had a mouse ever in the tiny house, I think because of the solid steel bottom on the trailer. So there's no good way for them to get in here. Have yet to see one get in the shop. I saw one in the chicken barn for a minute, but I don't believe it made it very long. And yes, the cats keep our property pretty well patrolled for rodents, the small ones, so that is nice. And they also hunt some of the neighboring hayfields around us. Our closest neighbors over there are horses in a pasture, and sometimes cows, depending on the time of year. So yes, the kitties get lots of chances to hunt mice. And I guess that's the same person. Rocket Scientist also asked, do we have a root cellar for those times when it's either too hot or too cold for stored canned, jarred, or fermented foods? Not yet. That a root cellar is absolutely, definitely been in my dreams on whatever property I ended up on for many, many years now. It would probably be going under the house that we're going to build. So that's another one of those. Yes, there will be someday, and we don't have one yet. Margot Kennedy asks, how many chickens do we have now? How many of last year's flock made it to the table? So this year we're doing, and I was in the middle of working on a chicken update video when I got sick. So it'll get done here in a day or two. We did the same thing last year as this year. We have our flock of Icelandic chickens that are our egg layers. We've got our 2 adult roosters. They're reproducing themselves and so on, as well as ducks for eggs. And then extra roosters. The plan was that because when you hatch your own eggs, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of extra roosters, because 2 adult roosters is almost too much for the property. We really only need 1. The second one's a backup in case something happens to one of them. But that is definitely plenty for the property. And when you hatch your own eggs, you're going to end up with more roosters than that. So they will all be headed to freezer camp. And then the last 2 years, because we didn't have... last year we just got our Icelandic chickens. This spring, I wasn't yet sure how they would do on going broody and successfully raising babies. We had got a batch of birds that were just the hatchery special spare heavy heritage breed meat boys. So I wasn't sure what we were going to get either time. I think what we've got out there right now is Buff Orpingtons and what are the other ones? I'll think of their name in a minute. Anyway, those will all be going to the freezer camp. We're not planning on keeping those as a reproducing flock. And next spring, I'm hopeful that we had enough hens go broody this year that I'm pretty confident we can raise just our own birds here, not have to deal with the hatchery again. And and just use the spare roosters basically that come from that as our meat source. So right at the moment, how many chickens do we have? There's like 83 something birds out there counting the ducks. By fall, it's going to be back down to, with our new teenage girls, Icelandic hens joining the laying flock, we're going to have like 20 hens and 2 roosters, not 80 going into winter. Nora Sullivan asks, this is kind of random, but what do we think about Earthships? Would we consider building one as your permanent home? I've looked at various interesting stuff. The building department is not my area of expertise. I would suspect what we're going to build is something out of a wood structure, because Clay has been professionally building with wood for most of his life, and that's what he knows well and is really good at. Snow Farmer asked, how much daylight do we get at this time? And that question was asked almost a month ago. So if I'm thinking back to the end of June, that was close to the longest day of the year. It's daylight from about 4 a.m. to little after 10 p.m. We get pretty long summer days. Of course, it's getting shorter now at this time of year, and in the middle of winter, over the shortest day, it's something like 8:30 to 4. So we definitely get something of a swing there. Off-Grid Homestead L. Wyoming ask, let's see, they mentioned the firewood, the garden. They wanted to know if we used a realtor to find our current property. When they purchased this one, a realtor showed it to us, but there were other properties we wanted to look at. The realtor wouldn't show it, just gave us directions. Some we never found to look at. Yes, that's a very similar experience that we have. No, we did not. The sellers of this property that we bought it from had a realtor. We were not using a realtor ourselves. If you're interested, I did a video. I'm not a real estate professional or anything, but I did a like 5 video series on a lot of our experiences in shopping for a property over quite a few years. And went into a lot of detail just about what we found and experienced and learned. So if you're looking for a homesteading, tiny house, bare land, kind of property, maybe some of that experiences would be helpful. You can find that playlist on the channel homepage. But no, we did not use a realtor on our end. And I did have similar experiences with realtors that were too lazy to show a property you possibly want to buy. Man, we got a lot of questions. Timothy Michael asked about the beehives. Is the lid insulated? Is there any evidence of melting comb? Just curious with this year's heat and all. The lid is insulated. The sidewalls are insulated. The bottom is insulated. That's one reason I chose to go with the horizontal hives for the bees in our cold climate, with the much bigger frames to give them more space to make their bee ball and work their way up eating honey through the winter, and to be better insulated. I think they're about 10 times the R value of a standard Langstroth, just wood box stacked hive. And no, we have not had any problems at all with melting comb. Only one really hot day where it didn't cool off much overnight did I even see some bees like bearding on the outside, like they wanted to cool off. So that seems to be working well. We have yet to see if we have bees still alive next spring, but we'll find out. But the heat does not seem to have been an issue. Ruthbauer's wondered if we irrigate the grass since the birds need to forage on it. It looks green for as little rain as we get. And she asked about how the micro clover we plant is doing. So that question was asked before I had done the clover update. So hopefully that got answered. No, we have not generally irrigated the grass. Most of the grass we have growing around here right now is quackgrass that I would like to kill. So because it's choking everything else out. So yes, some has got water on it in places where it's beside something else I need to water, but no, we do not purposefully irrigate it for the birds to forage on. Ducks eat some grass. Chickens will peck at it, but chickens don't really eat grass, like a cow or a sheep does, or even to the extent that a duck does. They eat seeds, they eat some greens, and they hunt a lot of bugs, but they seem to be, even with 80 something birds on the property, finding tons of bugs and everything to eat, hunting through the existing grass without us watering any grass that we don't really want to have growing. But we did get some rains the other day, which was wonderful. And now a lot of the grass that I didn't want to have growing is growing better again. Laura Higgins asks about on the one of us hiking, do I carry bear spray in case you get charged by a grizzly bear? Yes, I've always carried bear spray, which if you're not familiar with it is like, it's not bug spray. You don't put it on yourself. A few people have made that mistake. It's like mace, just a very high powered mace with a 35 foot spray range on it. I've always carried that while hiking. I've spent a lot of time hiking alone or with another single female friend of mine over the years. It's effective against any mammal with mucous membranes that would be irritated by the capsicum content. I've never needed to use it against any mammal, but I do carry it. And there are a lot of grizzly bears in the general area, especially up in the mountains. There are some places where they're so thick now that places where I have hiked and camped in the past, I just wouldn't choose to go now. And I may choose to also carry a gun at the same time if I needed to go through one of those areas. But yes, I have always carried bear spray. Thankfully, never ever needed it. Wendy Weaver had a bunch of questions about onion growing. She has an overlooked onion that sprouted in early March, lives in Seattle using a container. Per her research, onions do not produce seeds until the second growing season. Planted onions will branch and divide into several onions that are more oblong than round. The planted onion now has 7 onions, the tops of which appear to be 3 small ones, 2 small medium, and 2 medium large. Can these onions be harvested at different times? Can she pull one onion apart, leaving the others in the container? Or do you have to pull the entire group at the same time? If all the onions must be pulled at the same time, can we replant the smaller ones to harvest later? And how to decide which onion to keep growing so I have onion seeds next summer. There are a lot of kinds of onions, Wendy, and without knowing what kind you have, that's a little bit hard to answer. There are bunching onions that grow kind of in a clump and they keep like making new babies off to the side, and you can just pull the babies off and the parent one will keep, kind of like a hens and chicks plant, keep making babies. Mostly what I grow for storage here are like a single, and that may be what you have from the way you described it's growing. I'm just not sure. The single onions like Walla Walla and some of those that store fairly well that I grow, they make one fairly big bulb, and then I harvest them, let them cure, and they don't go to seed. But you could pick any one of those. I would probably, if I was picking an onion to have go to seed of any variety or anything else that's not an onion, I would pick out the healthiest looking, most vigorous, earliest maturing, whatever one has a trait that you really like, and let that one go to seed to harvest your seeds from, because that gives you a better chance of getting that trait that you like. And know if they're actually separate onions, you can harvest them at all different times. I start pulling onions as soon as there's like green onions. I use some for cooking, then I use some as their medium onions, then I need to go probably harvest onions very soon. We've got some great big ones out there that are about done growing, but you can pull them all at different times. And if you replanted one you pulled, its roots would be pretty disturbed, but it may live through that to produce seeds next year. But there are lots of different kinds of onions. And if you have one of those bunching onions that just keeps making babies off to the side, you can just keep pulling babies and it'll keep reproducing. So I don't know if that's helpful. It's a little hard to answer without knowing a little bit more about what kind of onion it might be. Jenna H asked, do we can vegetables from the garden? If so, where do I store them? Have I shown a cellar type storage area on the property yet? Yes, can lots of stuff. Search canning on the, I just splashed my tea in my lap. Get too concentrated on my talking. Lots of videos on canning various things, peaches, tomatoes, berry juice, pickles, pickled carrots. I forget what all I've taken the time to do videos on, but there's a bunch. And where do I store them? I've done a video of storage in the tiny house. There's a pretty big pantry here. There's a loft space up there. And with the shop now, we have a little more space to put some extra storage, shelves and so on. Long term, once again, I'm really hoping that we have a root cellar and pantry underneath the house, but we don't have that yet. Somebody also asked a question about laundry, which I already had answered with the other one. Have you shown us a compost site on your property? I don't recall seeing one. Go back and search composting on the channel. You'll find lots of videos talking about what we do with our humanure, how I build compost bins for nearly free out of pellets, how I fill them up, how I let them break down, how I move them. But yes, the answer is yes. And I've done lots of videos covering that. Joe Lewis asked, where do we get our wood from and how much do we typically use per year? So what I have the most experience with is just in the tiny house itself. For many years when I lived in the clearing, I was simply collecting wood from the standing dead trees right around me in the woods on that property on the ranch where I lived. What we have here now is still a lot of wood collected from the properties where I've lived or where clay works. They have quite a few hundred acres, and there's a lot of standing dead trees. This area has had beetle kill pines for years now, so there's a good bit of that. And if we didn't have access to that property anymore, there are programs to go into the national forest and cut dead trees, which helps reduce the extreme fire danger there as well. So that's where our wood is being sourced from. Over the years here, I've used between a cord and a quarter to a cord and a half, depending on the weather that winter, to heat the tiny house. Now we also have a stove in Clay's shop, and then we will have a stove in a small house. So I don't know yet with all that what we're going through, but a cord and a half has always been sufficient to keep the tiny house blazing hot with windows open a lot of the time all year long through our very long winters here. Rhythm Junkie says they've searched around, can't seem to find any videos on staying cool in a tiny house without AC in the summer. Would love to know how I manage it. Sleeping when it's hot out is an issue for me. Sleeping for me when it's hot is an issue as well. My advice probably doesn't help most people. Move to somewhere it's cold most of the time. That's really what we do here. Even when we have hot summer days, we fortunately get pretty cool nights. And by pretty cool, I mean most summer nights are in the low 40s, 30s, or even below freezing Fahrenheit. So this does not work. I get that if you live in a place where it stays 90 degrees all night. But what we do here, it's what I did when I lived in an apartment. It's what I've done the whole time I've lived in the tiny house, etc. Is you open all your windows up at night. You go to sleep under a pile of blankets because I like sleeping in cold air. In the morning, the house is pretty cool, like 45 degrees or so inside after all that. You close all the windows. It stays feeling pretty air conditioned all day long. And about the time it's starting to warm up in the evening, the outside temperature is cooling off, and you open your windows again. If you don't live in a climate that gives you the weather to do that, that is a lot harder. It's hard to do AC without electricity, and the size of solar system we've got here would no way run an air conditioner. Kathy Vanilla asks, will we ever slightly dam our creek to create a small pond? We have talked about creating a small pond somewhere on the property. As far as damming the creek, no, that would run into major water rights issues in most Western states. There's very specific rules about who has access to what water to do what and how much and so on. We do have irrigation rights to either pump or flood the property with that, and that's coordinated with other neighbors in the area and other farmers and ranchers and so on. If we do a pond, it would be separate from the creek, but we can't just dam the creek and take our neighbor's water. Somebody just called YouTube. Says, what will happen with the bees in the winter? Will they be able to survive a cold climate? And they love the planter boxes around the house. Hopefully they will survive the winter. Honeybees are actually fairly cold hardy, kind of like chickens. The main killer is getting damp. Our chickens live in an unheated barn. Of course, they are Icelandic chickens. They are more geared toward surviving a cold climate. But as long as they don't get wet or damp, their insulation and fluff and whatever keeps them warm. I have been reading about people successfully keeping bees in northern Canada, Alaska, Siberia. Those are the more similar climates to ours. And as long as you can, if they've got good honey stores, which ours have a ton of honey out there right now, and they're bringing in more by the second. And if you can keep them dry, keep condensation from forming inside, they should have a good chance to survive. Now, every year, some beehives die for a host of reasons. So I'm certainly not counting on, man, my voice is getting hoarse after answering this many questions. I'm not counting on all 3 of our hives still being alive next spring, though I would love it if they were, but we're trying to give them the best chance. So well-insulated hive with some good ventilation, which I'll probably do a video on getting the hives winterized whenever I get to that point. But hopefully the bees will survive the winter, though it won't be shocking if some don't, because even in warm areas, like my dad lives in southern Pennsylvania, which is way warmer than here, and he's lost all his hives several winters in a row. So that does happen. Penny Peace Cornelius asked, how is the solar system holding up? Are we planning an upgrade? How do we tell the freezer-bound birds from the other ones? So the solar question, I had done an update late winter, midwinter, something on that. So I'm not really going to go into that here, but some of the parts are getting toward the end of their lifespan. Everything's still working fine now. If you've got lots more solar questions, look up solar and find the video I did sometime in the middle of last winter on how the system's going right now. Nothing's really changed since then. How do we tell the freezer-bound birds from the other ones? Back to what I was saying earlier, we got spare boys roosters from a hatchery that is a fairly reasonably priced deal because more people are looking for laying hens. And in some hatcheries, the extra boys at a day will just go in a wood chipper and become dog food. So anyway, they can sell them relatively inexpensively. We can easily tell them apart. Our Icelandics are all different colors, but they are a much smaller, more petite bird. And if you just look at their frame, their legs, everything, they just look totally different. The ones I'm not sure even what all we had last year. We had at least 3 varieties in the hatchery special boys box. This year, I think we only have 2 varieties that were in there, but they are very noticeably different birds. They're bigger, they're beefier, they're wider, their leg shanks are way bigger. It's like, how do you tell a Labrador apart from a border collie or something? They just look entirely different. Isabel Grandos asks, do we have any medicinal herbs in the garden? Thank you. Yes, in the garden, around the tiny house, in the beds around the garden, all over the place. If you go back through the channel videos, you'll find videos of me doing things like using the horseradish we grow to make fire cider, drying herbs and teas for use in cooking and medicinally, and just because I like drinking tea all through the winter. Doing several different kinds of tinctures and extracts. But yes, we've got a bunch growing. That could be a whole video in itself. Maybe it will be another one of these days. And foraging for some wild ones as well. Krister said the hummingbirds we get so high up, where do they go when it's very cold? She's in the foothills of Northern California where they stop putting out their feeders in late October, November. So the birds can go to where they survive when we're getting snow. Just curious. Yes, our birds migrate as well. It's amazing that something as tiny as a hummingbird can migrate thousands of miles. I don't know if the ones that come here winter in Mexico or further into South America or where, but they definitely go south from us in the winter. And I usually leave the feeders out. None of mine seem to have left yet. At least they seem to be going through food at about the same rate. And there seems to be about the same number of birds around here. But any day now, I expect to see them starting to thin out and leave. I always leave the feeders out so that any migrating through can get, a rest stop and some food if they need, until I just realize, okay, I haven't seen a hummingbird in a while now. And then I clean the feeders and put them away for the year, and they'll be back in the spring. So I'm not sure exactly where ours winter. We have mostly broadtails and calliopes and rufus. And then I saw a couple black-chinned hummingbirds this summer. I've never seen them before. That was really cool. When I looked them up, we're like very borderline on the edge of where their range is supposed to be. So that was neat. But we have mostly the first 3, so you could probably look up where exactly they winter, but somewhere south of us. B. Lambert asks, have my parents ever been able to come for a visit? Love the stream and the chucklings, etc. Yeah, my dad was here this spring helping my brother pick up a work vehicle that he was buying across the country. They were here for like 4 hours. Both my parents were here quite a few years ago now, long before I had the tiny house, for a visit after my one sister's wedding. My mother had been through the area in Wyoming long before I was born, but they've only been here together once. I have a lot of siblings who have a lot of nieces and nephews, their grandbabies, so they spend more time with them, and maybe someday they'll both come here at the same time or different times to visit again. We'll see. I live several thousand miles away, so I get that that's a little bit complicated. Okay. Christina Elliott asks about the water supply. Safe and reliable water is important, as we know. Eventually, will we be digging a well on the property? If not, other than a seasonal stream or hauling water into storage, what's the long-term plans for water security? Yes, water, of course, is essential to life, and so that was one of the biggest deals when I bought the property. In addition to the stream, which runs, that we can use for irrigation or watering animals or watering trees or whatever, we also have gravity-fed spring water that comes from a spring that's about 2 miles up the mountain. It's piped down to this property and a couple neighbors. It's just a little private system. I think it was all first cousins or siblings that originally did it many, many years ago, and we are still benefiting from that today. So as long as gravity still works, and nothing happens to the spring and it's been running with no issues for at least 60 something years, we should always have that water. I don't know if we'll ever decide to also drill a well. At the moment, we've got pretty reliable water. And yes, we might put in a bigger water tank to store it if something ever happens, like somebody else breaks the water line temporarily in the process of construction, like we did a couple years ago. But the fact that we have reliable access to good water is one of the features that we really liked about the property here, which made us buy it. Tammy Gammy said a friend of hers told her in an earlier video we were expecting a baby. Is this true? Nope. We've had lots and lots of babies around the property of lots of species, but none of the human species, and there is not one on the way. Patsy Cluting Lucas, sorry if I'm butchering your name, asked, do we plan to stay in the tiny home or eventually build a little bigger home? Will we build a greenhouse or high tunnel? So I kind of already addressed the home building thing. And yes, my dream is to have a sunroom greenhouse. Being distracted by Zipper outside the window. Onto the side of that where we can grow at least a few veggies through the summer, or I mean through the winter, and start things for the garden and so on, and have a place to soak up some sunshine when it's wintry for months on end. And yes, probably like an outside big high tunnel cold frame kind of thing that would allow me to do what I'm currently doing over the garden beds, but like all as one, and have all the garden beds under that just to make it a little simpler, more efficient. Those are all dreams, and they're probably several years in the future. Linda Leal asks again about building a traditional house in the future or use some non-traditional methods in a home. Is Clay's machine shed warm enough to start seeds early? So yes, we are planning to build something. It'll probably be a wood-based structure. We live in an area with a lot of trees, a lot of wood, and like I said, my husband has the most experience with working with wood, so that's probably what we'll be doing. The shop could be kept plenty warm if we feed enough wood into that stove, but there's not a lot of light. There's some windows that let in some daylight enough to see kind of thing, but there's not the kind of windows that will allow me to start a lot of seeds in there without having to get supplemental grow lights or something like that. So that's back to long term. I hope to have it as a to have a seed starting greenhouse, but we don't have that yet. Lily Avery thought it was funny that my peonies were blooming so late compared to most people's, which they do. Let's see, what was the question? She wanted to do a Q&A including medicinal plants that we can plant. Bought some seeds that she hopes are going to prove useful at her new place, and would love to hear what kind of birds we have. So the medicinal plant subject is huge. That would probably need its own video, and I don't have any clue, Lily, where you live and what kind of climate you have. I've done videos on what I grow around here, stuff that can handle cold well. If you're way warmer, you can probably grow all kinds of things I can't. Maybe a few of the ones I grow wouldn't like your place. So that's hard to answer. Probably do some more videos on herbs and medicinal stuff over time. That's kind of out of the scope of this. What kinds of birds we have? She has over 40 different species. I've never counted the species, but just off the top of my head, I have the 4 species of hummingbirds, or 4 varieties of hummingbirds I've listed. We have many kinds of finches, many kinds of sparrows. We've had robins, meadowlarks. We get various kinds of hawks and eagles that fly over occasionally. They don't really stay here on the property. Chickadees, a few warblers. They usually stay down by the creek and they move really fast, so they're hard to get a good picture of. Various kinds of swallows. There's some kind of like flycatcher bird I've been seeing on the fence recently that I have not ID'd. I don't know what it is. Let's see. We got mourning doves. Some pigeons occasionally fly over. That's probably the ones I see most often, but I'm hoping that as we get more and more trees planted, we continue to see more and more. There's already a lot more birds here that were not here 2 years ago before we started planting trees and flowers and so on. But those would be the most common. And flickers, which is a variety of woodpecker, and sapsuckers, we see those. Bequita asked about the bees. She didn't know they could make their own queen without swarm cells. I wonder why some beekeepers order new queens when they notice the queen is no longer there. And then how do I get the bees GPS to change when the bees go out once they go back to the original hive? That was asked, I think, when we first did the split. So if you have a hive that has no queen and no little teeny weeny eggs, that colony is in trouble. They can't do anything to create a queen then. What I had going on is I had an actively laying queen that had laid new little teeny weeny eggs, and the worker bees are able to, the nurse bees are able to raise a new queen from one of those babies. So I gave the teeny weeny little baby eggs laid by my active queen that I still had in the one hive into each of the new hives, so they had a chance to raise one. But yeah, if I only had one hive and that queen died and I didn't notice for like 3 days, all the little eggs would be gone, and then I would have to get a queen from somewhere else, because that wouldn't be, I would have no way for the bees that were here to raise one themselves. So that's probably why other beekeepers have to do that at times. And getting their GPS to change, yes, there are ways to do that, but when I moved any adult workers that were already oriented to their old home, when they flew out, they would have gone back to the old home. The new bees, the nurse bees, and the newly hatching bees that were moved, they would orient to their new location because it's where they hatched. And there was enough of those that didn't seem to be an issue. Okay, that is my list of questions that I had saved up from people. Now let's say I've seen this comment thread just going absolutely crazy. So let's see if I scroll back up here, what questions we have. Okay. Hi, hello, welcome back. Lots of hellos from everyone. It's so cool to see so many people here. This is neat. I don't even know how many people are here. There's probably a way to tell that. Oh, it's telling me 261. There it is. That's cool. It's amazing. Hopefully nobody was doing anything too rude or crazy here, because I haven't been watching the comments. Doesn't look like it. Oh, beautiful victory. Congrats on your move to Minnesota. That's nice and cold like us too. Jimmy, no, I am not single. I am married to a very wonderful man. 44 North. Hi from Burlington, Wyoming. That's our closest neighbor. Hey, neighbor. Closest neighbor I've seen on here yet. Oh, Czech Republic. That might be the farther. Oh, and Ireland, Netherlands. Okay, we got lots of people from long ways away. Okay, question for you from Discovering Cindy. If we were given land outside of our area, what would we do with it? Keep or sell? I guess maybe that would depend how far outside the area. If it was, or where, if it was somewhere I had like a friend or family or somebody who was looking for a place to live, maybe we'd try renting it. But if it was like way out of the area, we like where we live and we plan to stay here, so we'd probably sell it, because I mean, it would depend where it was and the situation, but I don't see us wanting to be like trying to manage a property at some great distance. That just wouldn't be very practical if I didn't know somebody in that area who was interested in living on it and maintaining it well. Thanks for all the well wishes. We are feeling better. Yes, Cooking Princess, my husband is awesome. Hi from North Carolina. And oh, somebody, Midnight Run Kennel, is moving to North Dakota. So that is kind of closer to being neighbors. Clay has a couple daughters in North Dakota, and they get real winter up there too. They live on a ranch out there. And yes, beautiful victory. If you're headed for North Dakota, South Dakota, or Minnesota, they all come with a lot less heat, that's for sure. How do I minimize the dust in the tiny house? Well, like I was just saying, where I've got windows open and such all night, dust comes in the tiny house. How you minimize it is I use a feather duster, because that, like an actual ostrich feather duster, it has kind of a, it's not magnetic, but it tracks dust. Instead of just smearing it around, it actually picks it up, and then you can wash it out and let it dry and use it again. And occasionally wipe things down. I have that little teeny weeny vacuum I did a review on years and years ago, a little handheld one that lets me suck dust out of corners that are otherwise hard to get into. I'm still using that same one. But mostly because it's a really small space, it doesn't take long to clean, because dust definitely gets in here. With 2 people, 2 dogs, and windows open, we get dust. Let's see here. Where else are questions? How many ducks and chickens do we have now? I think I answered that already. We got 80 something out there at the moment. Will the bees live through the winter? We also address that. How is my tooth? I'm not feeling it anymore, so that's wonderful. Hopefully that is all cleared up. Oh man, I am Sorry for anyone whose temperature gets to 110 in the summer. I would be miserable. Hello, Cindy Jean from Nebraska. Russell Zahner says they have 3 different breeds of chickens and their eggs are each different from each other. When I said yolk size, it prompted me to point out that one of those breeds lays eggs that are almost all yolk. That's interesting. Yeah, I would say our Icelandics, they lay a slightly smaller than your average grocery store egg. They're a slightly smaller bird and they eat way less food. So it worked out really well. But if you just buy large eggs in a grocery store, our Icelandic eggs are just a little bit smaller than that. But I'd say the proportions are very comparable to being the same. Okay, where else is question? Oh, somebody else asked, do my parents ever visit in Wyoming? I just addressed that. How do the chickens break their toes? I don't know. I have no clue what Golden Boy did. One of our hens, she was climbing on the snowblower handle, and I guess her foot slipped, and there's like a handle and another metal piece, and she caught her toe in between there. And when I found her, she was hanging upside down by that toe. So I know how she broke hers. I wasn't sure if she was going to recover from that, but she did, and she is fine. I don't know. Our chicken's free range. It's one of the side effects of them having access to acres of property. Sometimes they do things to themselves. I don't know. Greetings to Lake Tahoe. Midnight Run Kennel says if the shells are dried well and crushed, they'll not look like an egg anymore. They never had egg eaters either. Yeah, some people say you have to bake them so that they don't taste raw anymore. I haven't been baking ours, but I do let them dry out and I crumble them just loosely and feed them back. And it just hasn't been an issue with having hens start eating their own eggs or each other's eggs. Oh, hi to Finland. That's a beautiful country. From the pictures I've seen, never been there. Hello, Beth in California. What's our drought situation like? This area of Wyoming is definitely still in a drought. We are not quite as bad as we were coming out of winter. We had a very, very low snow year, but then we did have some massive rains. For us, massive. They'd be tiny for some people this spring. And then over the past couple of weeks, we had a lot of thunderstorms. Every now and then one would actually put down some measurable moisture, like 1/8 of an inch or so, which is pretty big for us. Sometimes they just make enough splats into the dust that you can see dust spots, and they made a lot of pretty rainbows. But so we're not as bad as we could be, or as bad as we were coming out of winter, but we're definitely still in a drought. But I bet a lot of you in California are worse off. So I hope we all get rain in nice, gently soaking in amounts. Let's see here. Yeah, 43 North. I don't know why mosquitoes don't like me as well as they like some people, because my skin reacts to just about everything, but thankfully not. I don't seem to be the most popular person with mosquitoes. Beth encountered mosquitoes around Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Yes, I've done some hiking around and used to live in Jackson Hole, and there are some places where they are bad some years. Suramea wonders about letting us follow our food conservation process for the harvest. Yes, whenever I have time, I try to do videos on harvesting or preserving or drying or canning or fermenting food. And you can go back and find ones of fermenting sauerkraut and drying herbs and canning various things. Every now and then I just run into stuff where it's like, this needs done right now, this second, and I just don't have time to run the camera. But every time I can, I will do my best to do that. Did I end up planting corn this year, Andrea? No, I hope to. You probably remember me tarping that big stretch of ground to kill the grass last fall. I was hoping it would be dead this spring where I could try planting some corn in it, because the corn would get too tall for the existing garden beds to be able to use the covers and so on. This spring, the grass was still very much alive under there. In midsummer, it was still very much alive under there. So I left the tarp, and now it is looking pretty dead under there. So maybe next year, but man, that stuff is hard to kill. It took almost a full year of having no sunlight at all accessing it under that plastic to eventually die. But now I have a clear spot, so maybe next summer. Let's see, what other questions? Hello to Patsy in Oregon. So happy to see where I live. Do we have any interest in sharing more about our wedding? Several people ask about that. Clay and I did a very, very small wedding. I have been to so many friends' weddings over the years, many of them very massive, and I left every single one having seen a close friend get incredibly stressed out by some little detail or another, and with a yet growing longer and longer list of things where I thought, well, I will never do that, and I will never do that, and I will never do that. So what we did was a very, very tiny and private wedding, and it was perfect, and we loved it. And because for us, the main point is that we wanted to be married to each other, not a one-day party. So no, there's probably no other photos or video from that because we didn't really take any. What will be my next canning project, Patsy? Let's see. If I can get my hands on tomatoes, I need to do about another 160 pounds of tomatoes into that same spaghetti sauce recipe you've seen videos on before that we use for spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, tomato soup, all of that, because we're running low. But apparently there was a blight in Utah, which is kind of the closest places to me where I usually get tomatoes, and the guys I've bought them from in the past by the case, because they're kind of semi-local to me. They lost over 100 acres. They have no tomatoes. So I got to figure out if I can source some tomatoes somewhere, but I need to do that. We're also almost out of salsa, which I usually make. I did make some sauerkraut the other day. I've got some more I need to do. I did pick my little cabbage heads because the flea beetles were starting to eat into them, so they weren't very big, but I did get enough to make some sauerkraut. And I probably need to dehydrate some zucchini and some carrots and pull and dry the onions and garlic because they're both pretty much ready, but that's not canning. Actually, I might be picking service berries, which are a wild berry. They're also called Saskatoon or June berries. They're just getting really ready in our area. And if I have time, I want to show you guys how easy it is to make berry juice when you're canning with them. That might be the next one. Hello to Tina in Norway. Let's see. Be interesting to see honey being harvested. Yeah, it will be for me too, because I've never done that before. I guess I helped my dad when I was really little, or watched him anyway. Hi to John in Ontario. Tolo Redding is wondering if we could cut the bottom out of a plastic bucket and sink it in the ground with a bit sticking up and plant a tree or shrub with a ring to keep the quackgrass out. Yes, maybe. I've thought about trying to do something like that, but I don't know how long it would work before the tree roots need to go out and would run into the bucket. So what we've been trying is cutting the sod way back from all the trees and bushes and covering the surface with that black plastic and holding it down with gravel so it doesn't blow away when we get gusty wind. And that seems, on the ones where we've got it done, and I meant to have it done on a lot more, that seems to be working. The tree's freely able to spread its roots underground, but the quackgrass can't come right into the trunk and choke it. And hopefully if some of those trees get a little bigger, they will eventually be able to fight back and make their own space. But so many of them were just so tiny and the grass is so aggressive. So I don't know. I've considered that, but I think it might get in the way of the tree roots. Pamela, have we been able to figure out how to get rid of the flea beetles? Oh, what I didn't say is after trying all the diatomaceous earth and the neem oil and the coffee grounds and the, alcohol and soap spray, which all killed a ton of them, but there was still millions more here. One day we got a cooler night and they just all left the whole area as near as I can tell. And it was not in line with any of the measures I took to try to discourage them. So they do seem to be gone and they seem to have left of their own accord. Hello, Madeline in New York City. David, where do I keep the car? It's usually parked down beside the shop. Let's see here. 44 North. Do I ever plan on selling Icelandic fertilized eggs, chicks, or pullets? Maybe. Since we have had success with hatching our own eggs, we didn't have a single not fertilized egg. We had one that died before it hatched. I'm not sure why, but it certainly was fertilized because it had grown for 20 something days. Maybe. I would love if some more people in my area would be interested in maintaining a flock of Icelandic chickens because I think they're amazing birds and extremely useful and practical for people living in a cold climate who wants a chicken that produces good eggs all through a long cold winter, doesn't eat gobs of feed, is very good at foraging for themselves if you have a space to let them do that, and so on. So yes, if we can have 4 or 5 hens who all want to hatch out chicks next spring, which looks reasonably likely, or if I can find anybody who's interested in, putting some eggs in an incubator, I would be delighted to do that. It would probably only be generally local. I don't plan to get into like shipping anything all across the country, but if some other people in this area would be interested, I think it'd be awesome to have more flocks of Icelandic chickens. There's only a handful of birds in the whole US and not that many left in Iceland. So they're I always forget. It's called threatened or something. It's not called an endangered species when it's a domestic breed, but they are a breed that could use help. So I would love to see more people raising them. Oh, let's see. Hi to Waleda in Denmark. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Somebody else asking a wedding. I just answered that. Josh, who determines which and how long your ads are? That's entirely up to Google. It has nothing to do with whether I'm doing a video about hummingbirds or planting carrots. It has to do with whatever Google thinks about you, Josh, and what you're interested in. So if I'm just making up something here because I don't know you, but if you're into dirt bikes, maybe you'll see a long ad for dirt bikes because YouTube thinks that you might be interested in that. And if Beautiful Victory watches it, maybe she's into crocheting and she'll watch the same video about planting carrots and see a video ad for yarn. I don't have any control over that. That's all up to YouTube. Hi, Sean in Germany. Hi, Leslie. Will we build a greenhouse in the future? Yes, certainly hoping to. Our Nord, are we still planning on building a small house? Yes, when we can. What are my plans for winter, DeMarco? Enjoy life being slower, shoveling snow, taking care of the animals, reading a few more books than I have time to, making a few more videos and catching up on some photo stuff from all summer when I just get too busy, dreaming about all the things I'll do next summer when I'm too busy again. I love winter and hopefully some time to go on like some snowshoes through the woods because I enjoy doing things like that, maybe photographing some more wildlife. Hi, Southern American Lady Rocker fan. What's it like living in a tiny house? Well, there's about, on this channel alone, 750 something videos where I talk all about that. So if you watch them, you might get a good idea. That's hard to cover in a single video. Let's see, what other questions? Questions. Enable a super chat. I guess I have no idea how to do that. Maybe I can figure that out at some time. Thanks for the thought for treating Clay and I to lunch. Yeah, I hope that we can share some useful knowledge. I feel really blessed to have learned a lot from parents, aunts and uncles, coworkers, neighbors, various people over many years. And I just like to pass on what I can because I don't want to be a dead end for all that. Oh, I'm sorry about your house burning down. Somebody said Airbnb with a question mark. Yes, maybe at some point if we eventually have a small house done, then yes, getting some income that way might be a good option. We're talking into the future. Do we have a well? On our 7th, I just discussed the water situation. No, we have gravity-fed spring water and a creek at the moment. How do you do Wi-Fi in a tiny house? Southern American Lady Rocker fan. I have always been in places where my internet connection has been some form of cellular based and using some kind of cell-based hotspot or something. It's been really slow in most of the places where I've been because when you are tucked into the mountains, there's not a lot of phone service, but it works. I've been doing videos for a long time. Oh, well, Beautiful Victory. That would be cool. If we ever get to doing an Airbnb, maybe you can come stay. Let's see. Can I talk more about the solid steel bottom? Where do I get it from? Do I have condensation issues? The solid steel base of the trailer was how the trailer was built because this trailer the tiny house is on was built specifically for building a house onto as opposed to being repurposed from some other job. And I think I forget who built this one. I think it was a small joint at that time. There's now multiple companies out there I know making trailers just for tiny houses, and I think they almost all have solid steel bottoms. think Trailer Made is the one company name I can think of off the top of my head. I know there are some others and I can't think of any of them at the moment. Condensation issues on the bottom of the house. No, I have had condensation issues my very first winter in here. Inside, when I was still using just a propane heater, just because of the extreme temperature difference from inside to out and the amount of moisture propane heat produces. Since we've had the little wood stove right there, had no condensation issues at all. And I don't believe there's a ton of insulation between the metal floor, the exterior metal sheet that is the very, very bottom of the trailer and the inside floor. So if there ever was condensation on the metal outside, that's never affected the house. Linda Leal, excited about hearing about new house plans, traditional plans, or environmental plans. Probably some combo. We're going to go with materials and skills that Clay's familiar with. Like I mentioned, I hope to set it up so our little sunroom greenhouse can mostly heat the house on a sunny winter day, because we do get some very sunny, clear days, even when it's like 30 below zero. And where the heat from the wood stove in the house would be able to keep the greenhouse above freezing when it's not a sunny day, because we also get lots of snowy days. And I hope to use the stored ground heat to maintain the pantry and root cellar temperature underground. So there's some plans like that, but it will also probably look from the exterior somewhat like a small normal house. I don't know that it's going to be like a geodesic dome or anything interesting looking like that. Let me see here. Questions. R. David Vaughn. Do I feel I have enough home to be happy, and has expanding or buying another or bigger tiny home? I think there might be a word missing there, but yeah, I guess I've kind of covered that. This space has fit me really well for all the years I lived in here by myself. It is a lot more snug with two people. And I know there are plenty of couples who live in, I've friend Macy Miller, her and her husband and a Great Dane and two children live in their house that's the same size. I'm not entirely sure how they do that, because they seem very content with that. That would be a little crowded for me. So yes, like we've discussed several times now, yes, we are hoping to build a slightly bigger small home. PJR, how did Clay and I meet, and are we planning on having children? We very first met when a mutual friend introduced us when we were out. I used to go dancing, like Western swing, a lot. There's kind of a regular crowd of folks that did that in the area where I lived at the time. A lot of them were much older than me. And then mostly we'd all just take turns dancing with each other. It was a nice, especially winter evening social activity. And I tended to stick with the people I knew because that was generally safer. Anyway, the one guy I knew introduced his friend Clay to me one time who came along. Clay recalls me being far too busy with the people I already knew, and that I ignored him and didn't dance with him. And then later, when I was waiting tables at a restaurant, he was a regular lunch customer there, because with his job, he doesn't work with any other people. So that was kind of his social life. He'd have lunch and come and talk to everybody at the restaurant. So we kind of got to know each other that way. And then it worked out that his bosses became my landlords when I moved into the tiny house, and they gave me a place to park it. And I, in exchange, helped them with extra work that needed doing. And since the person doing the work for them was Clay, that meant Clay and I were working together. And just over a lot of years of time, we got to be really close friends and realized we like working together and doing all kinds of things together. So that's the brief history of that. And no, we're not planning on having children. I have lots and lots of nieces and nephews. Clay has a handful of lovely daughters, and I think we're going to leave it at that. Let's see here. More questions. Beth asks again, I think I got your question on the drought situation. Better than it was. We could always use more rain, and I'm hoping for a very, very snowy winter. Cheyenne, Wyoming Urban Gardener. Hey there, neighbor. You did spell my name right. Have I considered doing some container growing other than the raised bed? You're successfully growing watermelons in Cheyenne. That's awesome. Yes, kind of. I haven't considered doing more of the smaller containers. They, like smaller pots and stuff, they just dry up really, really quick here with our dry air and sun and breeze and everything. But I guess the planters around the house would technically be containers. We'd like to sometime build a very long bed down the whole sunny side of Clay's shop, because that area I think would be significantly warmer than in that little microclimate because of the dark gray shop wall and the wind blocking. And I would love to try growing something like a watermelon in there. We haven't got that done yet, but that would be really fun. If I could actually get an edible ripe watermelon here in Wyoming, that would be neat. That's awesome that you've got some growing over there in the other corner of the state. Beautiful Victory. Do we plan on building a greenhouse? Yep, we've talked about that. Do the chickens lay their eggs around the yard? Yes, every now and then, not most of the time. Every now and then I can tell some lady will get a bright idea to go lay in some other little hidey hole, which usually I think I found. Of course, if there's ones I haven't found, then I haven't found them, so I don't know. But most of them seem to have just through the winter, I guess, got in the habit of coming back in their barn and using those nesting boxes. And so almost all of them, they go run around freely, and they mostly come back and lay all their eggs in the barn, which is very handy. So every now and then I find one somewhere, and they've probably successfully hid a few that I didn't find. Oh, great, Linda. I'm so glad you like the picture of Burley. He is sleeping on the floor, sound asleep over there. I'd probably mess up my mic if I try to turn the camera, but he's like breathing deeply with his eyes rolled up in his head because I'm talking to the computer, and that's boring. Okay, let's see. Questions. I love that you guys are all chatting so friendly, and I've seen some live streams go like badly rude, and I love that all of you guys are having such lovely conversations with each other. Joanna K, if we go foraging, can we please make a video? Yeah, I missed remembering to take my camera along when Clay and I went and picked wild currants the other day. So I got a picture of us holding the bowls that we picked when we got back, but I meant to take a camera along and I just forgot. Maybe I'll be able to get one if I go picking service berries, and I've done a few in the past about foraging for I think some mushrooms and various herbs and so on. But yeah, anytime I can and I have the time and I remember and I don't get out in the woods and realize I forgot my camera, yes. Judith Huntley, glad you could make it to live stream too. Bee questions. Are there construction plans for your beehive? Yes, I didn't build it. We were busy enough with too many other projects, so I bought mine already assembled from horizontalhive.com. But if you go to horizontalhive.com, he has free plans that you can use to build the exact same thing for yourself. So that's awesome. And it would be cool to build our own. Clay would certainly have the tools and skills if we weren't way too busy. So maybe we'll build one in the future, but I did buy mine. But yes, you can get free plans, the same one, horizontalhive.com. Dr. Leo gives those away to anyone who would like to use them. How about an outdoor pizza oven? We don't actually eat a lot of pizza. Actually, I like pizza, but neither of us digest dairy very well, and you can put all kinds of things on a pizza, but I really like a pizza with a lot of cheese, so we don't eat much pizza. But we've definitely talked about making some kind of outdoor oven somewhere at some point, maybe with a little sitting area beside the pond. This is all dreams for the future. So not right now, but that'd be fun to do. Rock Lover, do I fancy growing mushrooms in the corner of Clay's shop? I hadn't thought about doing them in the corner shop. I was definitely hoping once we got our treed forest edge there along the creek, where it's the biggest and most moist, shady area right now, planted out a little wider. I'd really like to try piling up some old logs and inoculating them with some kind of mushroom spores and seeing if we can grow some that way. I had not thought about doing it in the corner of the shop. Maybe I could consider that as well. Let's see here. I love that you guys are all figuring out your property moves and everything like that. How's the gray water drain field working? How far from the house do I pipe it? How does it work in winter? Here, much like in the last place where I was on top of that bench of whatever it was, at least 25 feet of just solid boulders, where it drained away, we have the little bit of topsoil here, and then it is like shale gravel for, according to the one soil well drilling report I'd looked up in the area, hundreds of feet down. So I know for a fact you can break a 4-inch water main on gravity fed pressurized water and dump, I don't know, 1 million gallons on the ground, and it disappears within a few minutes since we did that. So what the water's doing still right now is just draining into the soil under the tiny house. It is disappeared. There's not even a wet spot. I can't even tell if the grass has grown taller in that area. Clay has talked about wanting to eventually plummet into a little drain thing. I'm not sure that we really need that. It seems to be disappearing with no issue at all and filtering through the gravel. I'd like to plant a few more trees and bushes in that area that would hopefully maybe be able to tap into it and suck up some of the water. But right at the moment, it's not piped at all. It's free falling from the pipe at the bottom of the house onto the ground and disappearing, and it's worked fine all winter. It's what I did in the last place. It's what I did all last winter here. That's not been an issue, but our soil drains really well. I know there are some kinds of soil where that would be a problem. Christelle, hello from France. Yes, Linda's got a great point. You can always find more stuff linked under every video if you click on that. Henry, it's your first time joining us live. Well, it's our first time ever doing a live, so welcome. This is fun. I'm glad it's working. Oh, my flycatcher might be a phoebe. I should look up a phoebe. Maybe that is what the bird is. Kind of gray on its back with a creamy white chest. They're really pretty. I have not found them or haven't taken the time to look them up yet, but they're really pretty and they've been chirping prettily at me, and they're beautiful birds. Catherine Savello, will we be adding elderberry? Yes, I've got 2 plants growing right now. I think our very, very late June freeze this year, where it was like in the teens toward the end of June, I killed all the blossoms because they had flowers and then they did not make any fruit this year. But the bushes have still done a lot of growing, and I'd like to plant more yet. So hopefully one of these years we'll have our own elderberries. Hi, Sue from the UK. Hi, B. Lambert in Florida. Yes, I am sure you are really hot. Man, one of my best friends I grew up with lives in Florida, and I don't know how she does it. High Stamperitis, Zone 3 in Canada. Yeah, that's cold too. Hello, Arkansas. Sue, am I still in contact with Moose Villa now that he's moved out of the area? Yes, we've both been really busy, but we do text and call each other or email each other, or send photos of something we're doing every now and then. I think for both of us, summer is a very crazy busy time, but yes, we do stay in touch. Moose and I have known each other for quite a few years at this point. Hi, Gina in Colorado. Hi, Chunson in France. Pamela, you're welcome for all the info. B. Lambert. Oh, that's great that you can save your eggshells for tomatoes. I know a lot of soils that are low in calcium. That seems to be really helpful for a lot of people with blossom end rot and stuff with their tomatoes. I don't have tomatoes growing, and our soil has way too much calcium, so I don't need them for that, but that is terrific. Emily, what do I do for reliable and strong internet? It's not always reliable or strong, but we are out in a slightly more open area, just out from the side of the mountain. And so the cell service, I usually get like 2 or 3 bars of signal here, as opposed to most of my life, I've had 1 bouncing into none. So it is more stable here than other places I have lived in the mountains of Wyoming. But it is not like having a solid hard landline connection, which there is now on the road in front of us. So we might eventually have that in a house someday, as long as it works. Until it doesn't, I don't know. We will see. Hi, James in Michigan. Yeah, 1,000 Places, Las Vegas. I don't know if this actually works. Maybe we will do this more often. I was pretty nervous about doing it this time because usually, when you're filming and then you edit something, put it together, if you really badly screw something up, you can tell that before it's public. And so a live stream is a little intimidating to do. Hi, Doris in Eastern PA. I have another friend, Doris, in Eastern PA as well, with a different last name. CP, that's cool that you can chokecherry juice and that you liked it. The chokecherries didn't have a great harvest here this year. They were loaded last year, and this year it might have been that same late frost. We just don't have a lot, so I'm not sure if I'll get to can any juice from them this year, but we do like it when we can. Oh, hi, Ken in Pennsylvania and Monuments in New Jersey. Hi, Chronically Planty. That's a great name. Bye, Margaret. I see you have to go. That's great that you were able to join us. Cheerio. They saw another comment on another channel where someone's killing crabgrass with the tarp and putting chickens to scratch up the rhizomes. Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. The chickens scratch everywhere. And at the moment, we've got a bunch more areas tarped and some more I need to do. And yeah, so it seems like given enough time, that does eventually kill the roots and then give me a bare patch where I can actually plant other useful things I want to have growing. It's just a long process. Surame, do I still bake the German apple cake? Yes, I haven't made one in a while now. I probably should again because we're getting back toward apple season. But yes, I've been making that for years and we love it as well. I'm glad you do. Um, Jan, I'm glad you jumped on here too. Bambi Burris, you changed from water bath canning to steam canning. Total game changer. That's awesome. I grew up using them in Pennsylvania, and the area I live in, Wyoming, now has a lot of LDS folks that also use them, but a lot of people have never heard of them. But I've really loved my steam canner. I've been canning with it for decades. I have 3 of them, and they all get used. Mrs. Murray, there was a tiny house inside a geodesic dome. I've seen that video. It's pretty cool. I don't know that we're going to be able to do something like that here, but it is neat. Hey, North Star Prepsteader. Kathy, it's good to see you. Glad you're doing well. All summer, I guess I don't know what you've been doing. All summer, I'm so busy. I barely have time to look at my own computer. I don't get to watch anybody else's videos, but I'm hoping you and your garden had a great summer there in Minnesota. Um, I'm glad that I could share useful information for you. Anna Kiss. Teresa, how many square feet will we have in the tiny home? Not sure if you're asking about the one I'm in right now. Fine is here. It's about 158 square feet inside. If you're asking about one we plan to build, somewhere in the 500 or 600 range. It'd be nice to just have a little bigger kitchen space where like several people could walk past each other without like sucking in and having to be too crowded, and a little bigger sitting area and a little bigger table and a little bigger pantry and maybe a bedroom where friends could stay. I don't know, but nothing very big. Both of us primarily like our, I like to garden, I like to hike, I like to photograph. That's all outside. Clay likes to build things and fish, and our activities are outside. So neither of us wants to clean or maintain a big house. Anna, was I ever afraid of bears? I have a great deal of respect for bears. I used to host a lot of couch surfers long before I lived in the tiny house, and so I got to meet strangers from all over the world. It was a very neat experience. My former roommate Beth and I probably hosted several hundred people from around the world. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, I found that people who came to our area who were not familiar with bears tended to have one of 2 attitudes. Either they thought they were going to go feed them cookies, which is a stupid idea, or they thought every bear got out of bed every morning looking for people to eat, which is also not exactly accurate. You can occasionally get a very aggressive bear that does actively hunt people. I know a guy who was killed a couple years ago, saving the life of the client he was with on a hunting trip by a grizzly bear, left a wife and 5 children. That was very sad. That does happen. Most of the time, the analogy I've come up with to use is I treat bears like I would a semi truck if I got to walk down the edge of an interstate. Most semis aren't out there looking for a pedestrian to run over, but if you get in the way, they're going to kill you because they're so much bigger and heavier and they're moving at 70 miles an hour or whatever. I have seen several hundred bears in my time of living in Wyoming, both hiking around in my campsites, as I've walked in the yard of the tiny house, and so on. I have never yet actually had a conflict with one. I try very hard to have always kept no smelly food attractants around the house or around a campsite. Don't eat food in a tent. Don't eat food in your sleeping bag. If you're going to camp in areas, especially with grizzly bears, always have set up a triangle campsite. I'd like to have time to do a backpacking trip again and demonstrate some of this stuff, but where you cook in one area, you camp in another area, and then you hang your food in a third area and make sure your campsite is not downwind of either of the food areas. I have fortunately never ever had an issue, but I have a great deal of respect for the fact that bears are very large animals that could certainly kill a person. Kathy, yes. If I try this again, I was thinking it might be a great idea to have a moderator because I wasn't sure how. I'm very pleased to see everyone's been so delightfully friendly and polite here, but I know that can go the other way if you get just one bad apple in there. So that might be awesome. If I can plan ahead a little further, I will get in touch with you. Thanks again for all the well wishers. Oh, there my feed just jumped again. Okay. People make comments and then I lose where my place is at. Thanks for all the kind thoughts, everybody. Oh, let's see. Have I considered Starlink for internet? No, I haven't. The cell phone thing has been working fine, so I just haven't looked any further because it's easiest to just use what I've got. Um, Aline Ellen, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how you pronounce this. Pronounced Thornton. How's the clover doing? I did an update about that recently. Overall, it's doing really well. The little baby clovers I'd planted in the one bare spot are coming up thick and green, and just all around the house is starting to look like a really nice, lush green carpet of clover. Where when you look down into it, unlike the grass areas, where you don't see a bunch of bare soil anymore, it's actually solidly carpeted. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some of the taller kinds of clover that I planted in the orchard, they are surviving, and that is wonderful. Mrs. B. Murray, is it possible the roots from your quackgrass here in Alberta have made it to me? That is possible, entirely possible. When you go to pull those roots, they seem to go on forever. Cheyenne, Wyoming, urban gardener, will we be getting larger animals like geese, turkeys, etc.? I would love to grow turkeys. I almost came home from the local hardware store with some this spring when they had day-old chicks that they had just got in, and I'm glad I didn't because we had too many things going on. But I would love to raise turkeys at some point in the future. As far as anything bigger than that, probably not. We don't really have enough acreage here to support, we could support something like a sheep or whatever grazing for just a couple months a year, and then we'd have to buy tons and tons of hay because our winter is so long. So probably any of those bigger things don't really make sense. But yes, I would like to get turkeys someday. Paige and Neary, the camper dog, is the weather in south central Wyoming about the same as where we are? We'd probably tend to be a little snowier than south central Wyoming, but that can actually be colder and windier depending exactly where you're talking. But somewhat comparable. You might want to go follow the Cheyenne, Wyoming urban and gardener. She's in kind of the south end of the state compared to me. I think she gets a little warmer in the summer, but I think she might also get more wind in some of those flatter areas. The mountains are good for that, for blocking wind, though I don't know exactly where she's at, but somewhat comparable. Now I lost my place again. There we go. Yeah, it's so cool that so many of you guys could make it here. There's almost 300 people for a live stream. Yeah, we might have to do this again since it's actually working and I was smart enough to figure it out. Cheyenne, Wyoming. Do I mean I don't want to have the 10 kids homesteading family? No, I grew up as part of a big family. I have lots of wonderful siblings. I grew up around many even bigger families. I'd say most of the families we grew up, there was only 7 of us kids. Most of our friends had 10 to 14 to 16 children in the family, so I thought we had a little family. I love children. I've spent a lot of time raising younger siblings and worked in daycare for years and with adjudicated teen youths in an outdoor program. I like children. I love when my nieces and nephews come to visit. And I'll be honest, I like when they go home again with their parents. Anyway, let's see. Do I get bindweed here? I've never seen it here. I know what it is. I don't know if it can't grow in our climate or if it's just not growing here, but I haven't seen any. That's not been an issue. Anna, that's cool that you've done a lot of couch surfing. I didn't even know it was sold. I haven't used it in a while because I just didn't have the space to host people after moving into the tiny house. But I only traveled with it once or twice, but we hosted a lot of people and it was a lot of fun. Anyway, I think looks like we've got to the end of the questions. If anyone has one they want to throw in yet, we have been, oh my goodness, I can't believe it's almost 2:00 here. This has gone on for a really long time, so I should probably wrap it up because I need to go do some other things, but I'm glad this worked. Thank you so much for everyone who was here. And yes, we will see if we can do this again at some point. I was using it today as an excuse to not work too hard in the heat of the day because it is warm and sunny outside again, and I don't like the heat of the day. So it was a good excuse to come talk to you and try to catch up on all the questions. So, Amanda, where does my dog sleep? He's often slept in the loft with me. Now with 2 people in there, he finds that a little more crowded, and in the summer it probably is a little hot for him. He also likes to sleep right with his back up against the outside door, so he makes sure nothing can intrude upon us in the summer, in the in the middle of the night. He also likes to sleep everywhere. I mean, he's sleeping on the floor just on the other side of the table right now. He sleeps out, beside the chickens. He and Velcro, the cat, Zipper's not quite so cuddly with him, but he and Velcro will sleep outside curled up together. He'll sleep under a tree. But yeah, at night, he often likes to sleep right up against the door with his back against the door so he knows nobody can come sneaking up on us. Um, Good night in Denmark. And to everybody else there, wherever all you are, yeah, I had no idea what would be a good time to do a live stream because I know there's people all over the world in all kinds of time zones. So I just picked a time that worked for me. So that's how it went. We'll see if we can do this again. Anyway, I am going to head off to maybe pull onions. It's good dry weather, so maybe I should do that and get a video recorded of that. But anyhow, thanks so much for being here, and you guys all have a great day, and I am going to sign off now.